Morning, everyone. Please,
Morning, Dr.
yeah,
Ting.
morning. Please proceed to do your QR code. Then we'll do another one at 11 o'clock later. Okay, I think all of us or most of us has already checked in. Okay, let's get started. You all can see my screen on other contractual matters.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, good. So I don't want to be on the wrong page for the rest of the class and then talk so excitedly and then end up it's like, doctor, your screen is not moving. Okay. Right. Yes. Today we're going to finish up our contractual issues. Anything on contract matters. I think we have gone through quite a number of classes, both with physical, online, face-to-face, and also pre-recorded as well. I try not to give too much of pre-recorded, but sometimes pre-recorded is good to supplement in that sense, to what we did not cover in class, or additionally, hopefully that will actually help to explain some of the points through this pre-recorded. Pre-recorded actually usually is a bit shorter than physical classes. That is quite normal because with physical classes we do have other things like poses and waiting time and also questions and all that, and whereby sometimes we have break also. But with pre-recorded, we normally would just one shot me talk for like 80, 70, 80, 90, 120 minutes sort of thing. So it will generally be a bit shorter. Okay. So today we are going to finish up on contract matters. So so first class we're supposed to have this legal system, which is a general overview of the legal system. And then by Dr. Ambrose. So we had a little bit of swap over there. So he did 6 weeks of legislation, acts and ordinances with you, whether it's whether it's a legislative in terms of the national one, the Malaysian one, or the state one in terms of the ordinances, the codes and all that. So I think that one was 6 weeks. So those project I think you've all handed in already, and that one no issue. We passed that. Then we move on to supposed to be LU 8 onwards to LU 8, 9, 10, 11, about 11 LU, which is more on contractual issues, issues that are generally covered in Malaysian contracts. And I think we have went through time in a lot of that. And then there was a lot of questions as well. So when I was going back to do my notes, to review my notes, I actually tried to add in other things as well. That's why it took me a bit of time to actually go and search for the documents and all that. So it's a bit lengthy So the first set of notes was already posted. Second set was on payment, okay, on different type of payment, causes of delays and all that sort of things. And then there is money-related matters, what contract says about money in that sense. And third one was the one that I just posted on Thursday, and I'm pretty sure some of you still haven't got a time to actually go through it yet, but it's okay. You just have to take some time this weekend, next week, to finish up going through those issues. Okay, there's quite a fair bit of things that is covered there, which is all related to quality issues. I think I've only taken you for 2 classes in quality management. And these 2 classes, we talk about having a management system. It's a quality management system, that we are aiming to actually create for our project. And my favorite way of creating system is always the principle can be TQM, it can be statistical, yeah, but then it basically, have to follow certain principles in that sense, whatever basic foundation principles that you are following, I always like to do it like practically. You're supposed to be, creating your own management plan. It can be a PQP, which is quite common now in construction. And I'm sure mechanical manufacturing, M&E and manufacturing, especially manufacturing, you also have your own manual, on how to operate machines and how the material is imported or how the material is out into your factories and all that. Yeah. And then, how it's handled, how it's clean or, process. So there will be process. So process, methods, which material, manpower, machineries, operation of manpower, machineries, operation of the lines based on manpower and machineries. So yeah, so these are the typical guidelines that I would say, in any QMS systems that you should have. That is, you can break it based on your work breakdown. From your work breakdown, you break it into 4 components, and using tools such as flow charts, okay, then you can actually create your own QP, or what we call quality management system. Okay, and then you base your work method statements based on your work breakdown structure, and then your manpower, materials, your standards, your manual, your policies, and objectives, and the outcome, the desired outcome, and all that. It will be stated very clearly. So what the manpower should be doing, together with work method statement, or it can be a specific requirement on certification of manpower and all that. And then the machinery is the same, and the material you can have following certain standards and all that. So I'm trying to recap that with you, because when we go through the contractual aspects of quality, you will see that in the contract itself, we will actually mention quite a fair bit of these things as well. It's actually trying to supplement or support your practice. So the contract is like an underlying foundation of what you can do, your responsibilities, and that kind of like go together hand in hand with the QMS. So contractually, you will see that we will cover Malaysian contract, will cover whether it's standard forms or written specifically for the contract. It will cover things like standards. It will cover obligations of contractor to deliver the work in conformance with certain standards. Export standards, it could be British standards, it could be Euro standards, it could also be MS standards, like CRIM and all that, and ISO. Yeah, so different that is always stated in the contract some way. Okay, and then followed by you are asked to. I mean, it is, most contracts do not actually ask you to submit. Some contract does, some contract don't. It's like the documents you to submit is your PQP and your work method statement. Subject matter assembly is getting more common, but P2P still a little bit lacking. But then the SO do have the right to call for the P2P, okay, to ask for the P2P because they need to know the management, the QMS systems from the contractor side and see if that will complement the client and the management and the supervision part during the work is ongoing. Okay, so I think that one is they have the right, so SO have the right to ask for it. And then, but in the end, whatever it is, the P2P or WMS, the work matter statement, it has to be approved by the SO, or we call it supervisory team. So let's say if we put the word supervision thing under SO, architect, engineers. Okay, so they are the designers. They're usually the people who are looking after the job, supervision on behalf of the client. So they are the SO representative. Yeah, if they're not the SO themselves. Okay, and so we have that, so it has to be in both parties have to agree basically. One party write, one party request, one party write, one party commit to it, and then both parties have to agree upon it, and that will be the general facts that what we do the situation of submitting WMS and P2P, okay? And of course, we also cover things like the major things, material, manpower. Manpower, very specific. Material and machineries, usually there will be some writing in a contract regarding to the conformance of certain standards and specification usually. And then manpower, they will say that, please look at please make sure that they are certified, they're qualified, they have green cards, they have certain certification for authoritative bodies, they are approved, your supervision team must be approved by the client and the SO. So this one is quite commonly stated in the contract, and then also the remedial. Remedial is usually the SO has the right if it's non-conforming or is actually not the right thing, non-conforming, or is not or is broken, or is not so good. I mean, the quality, there's some issues with the quality. Then SO can call for replacements, okay, and also removal. So that will be typical remedy that you have in the contract for quality of material, manpower, and machineries. Removal, including people, okay. You can actually ask to remove certain people on site, okay. But if the contractor finds it hard to do the removal, in the end, the project may be delayed and they cannot claim extension of time because of that, that's for sure. And then they cannot claim for extra cost because of that. But having to say that removal of anything, on site, calling for removal, if it's a human part, then generally there is a certain standards that you have to follow. It has to be like they are really incompetent. You cannot say that because that guy cannot communicate with you as a SO, then you want him to be removed, it has to be showing real incompetency, like certain tasks that was given and it wasn't done or it cannot be done. They don't have the ability. The real test of the ability, not just like whatever you feel as a SO. And then, of course, it has to be very, very problematic things like, criminal issues or some form of conduct, really bad conduct, like that guy come to work, getting all drunk, or he is having very bad kind of behavior that can cause a lot of issues in terms of the site safety, for example. So there is some bottom line that you have to fulfill, not just anything like, you don't like the person, then you can call for removal. So it has to show real incompetency or conduct or behavior or safety problems before you can do the removal. Then we also move on to inspection, testing inspection. So that is pretty much typical of the SO's right, the client's right to actually inspect, inspect on the material, inspect on the machineries, the material, machineries, etc., and the workmanship as well. So inspection is just pretty much embedded, like it's probably not even like a really specific clauses, but that's the job of the SO, it's the responsibilities, and the contractor side must allow inspections. You cannot say, oh, I don't let you see my work, I cannot let you see my work, that sort of things, And yeah, inspection also, I think we also tie in with standing supervision. So this is part of this work together, huh? And then also we have testing. So you can call for some materials to be tested, okay? And you can call for requests for certain certifications of certain materials or people. You can call them send in the certificates like the new cert, the birth cert, or the records. These are all part and parcel of the rights, or the rights and responsibilities of the parties on site. So it stay in the contract. And then, of course, testing can also include a whole system test, and usually that would be tied in. Commissioning and system tests will usually be tied in with the completion work, which we talk about in the design part of things, and that would basically means CPC and also full completion. So that again has to be treated with care as well. Then we were looking at supervision and standing supervision, and that one also talk about some of the issue that is related to the following issue on opening up remedial work and rectification. So standing supervision is like, okay, it's the job of the SO to do supervision in contract, okay, but of course, like I say, I think all of you know, some of you who have been playing SO role for a long time, some clients, because of cost savings issue, they have to pick up the supervision part from the contract. It gets a bit more difficult for you to actually certify the work that is being done later on. But you are forced to do that, later on. So I think that one is the balance between contract and also as the engineer, we do have ethical rule and code of conduct followed as well. So I think that one is the balance between, which I mentioned in the notes before, that is the balance between SO role, because SO usually are engineers, engineers, architects, professional. We are also governed by the rules of carrying out our duty faithfully and impartially, and then putting the public's right and interest at the paramount. Okay, and then the other things like being a faithful agent to the client. So I think that one is our role plus the contractual role. So there's two parts here. Okay, so I think we have feeling our dual role in that sense. And then if we do go to court, the court do recognize that dual role as well. So we talk about, how certain supervision should be done. It must be there, and then standing supervision is when there are certain jobs, certain more critical, important, high-risk job whereby you need the SO to be there or SO rep to be there, the supervisory team to be there during the execution. So meaning that they have to witness. So then there will be certain things like, you make sure that you have to get your team to be there, and then there will be a notification from the builder, contractor side, service provider side for you to come in and, please get the get the notification, right? There will be usually in contract stated you're supposed to give certain time of notification. You cannot just say that I want to pour concrete now and then get the SO to come straight away. So there will be usually about nothing less than 24 hours. So then that is also a balance between how efficient you are and how long the notice should be going, how practical and how efficient things should be, and for the notification to be set that way. Then if let's say the job goes on without that, supervision by the SO, the slide is not moving. I'm just trying to recap whatever I've mentioned. It's very quickly for you all if you haven't gone through the lecture recording for the other one. This is what we have. It's a very brief, like a 10 minutes, 20 minutes kind of thing to run through the quality part in case you have any questions or any issues, since we want to settle that as we go along. Today, because we're going to be finishing up on all the contractual matters, then the second class will be based on PORT, which is also part of the legal systems in Malaysia. So about engineers. So I think it's worth it to be put onto the lecture. But I wouldn't go through it with you in class. So we will have the first class, and then the second class, we will have it in pre-recorded, which is going to be posted up next week, early next week. So essentially, we'll finish our class around 11-ish, 11 hopefully, and then you all go for your break because it is a holiday after all. So then the law of court, I'll post it up online in eLib, sorry. Why I do that? Because I think there's quite a lot of things to think about and remember in the law of court. So I prefer to do it in pre-recorded manner so that everybody can slowly go through it, you see, and we can be more detailed and more clear about each points. And then, if you don't understand certain points, you can look at the notes and then come back to the pre-recorded lectures, which is in 10-minute segments. So yeah, so back to the supervision thing. So we talk about the standing supervision, and the critical things is about, SO being there and not being there. If they don't come, if they are given ample notice and they don't come, and if they call for opening up, then what is the consequences, and then if let's say they come and do it, then that's fine, and then if they come and they're giving ample notice and they don't come and they call for opening up and there's nothing wrong with the thing, and then they're who's going to pay for it, so these are what is being covered in that sections of qualities aspects of things, so I put that under quality. So supervision, standing supervision, opening up remedial work and rectification work, rework basically and it's basically the thing like contract will cover like who to usually there's a right it's a right of the SO to do this supervision and testing, inspections and all that. And then, but if they found that things are not right, they can call for removal or rectification or reworking on the item. And there will always be a specific time frame that you need to give to the contractor. And then, of course, the very final remedial will be things like termination. That will be a breach. If you really don't do it after consistent. I mean, the contract will be very straightforward and say that like if they don't do it, you can get somebody else to do it and then pay for it. Then the contractor will pay for it. It's not so easy. I mean, the contract makes it like so easy, but actually it's not so easy. So there's a lot of procedures involved, in these sort of things before you can actually go for that kind of remedial work. Remedial, we call it remedies in contract. This all, but of course, contract is there to protect people, protect the people who are actually contracting. So I think this is saying that this is your last resolve in that sense. So of course, there's going to be many things before we need to go to that last resolve. So yeah, so we cover that, and then also I think the last thing that we were covering, and there's a few things like you need to check the site before make to the contract, by the contractor. Then also setting up, which is you need to make sure that the work is set up properly with the survey and all that by licensed surveyor, which is very typical in contract now. And then we also have last bit on instructions. So I think that was what was covered generally in the quality related issues in contractual matters. Okay, so I think if you want to, this is just a recap, a quick recap of what is in the part of the portion of the contract, contractual matters. Okay, so we have like week 8, 9, 10, 11, which is on contractual matters. Okay, so actually we went through the topic is 4. Like there's supposed to be 4 topics here, but we actually had a longer bit of time with that, with the whole thing, because I think it's worth it to be a bit slower in that sense, so that we can be, taking our time to really fully understand some of the facts. It may be new to you, it may not be new to you. Some of you are very seasoned engineers, so it's probably not new to you. it's also kind of like a revision in that sense, because sometimes when we practice for too long, we kind of forget, what is happening on papers. So hopefully that is all helpful for everybody. So today we're going to move on to the last bit of whatever that is left over, So we've categorized things under time, cost, and quality. And then now it's the others, yeah. So far, you guys have any issues, anything, maybe we can leave the discussion towards the end. Now, let we finish the class first, and then we will leave any discussion of assignments as well towards the end. Okay, and then, we'll see how we go, okay? Be all right with that? This is good news, okay? This is not going to be long because these are the leftovers, like we call it, okay? Variation, I mean, you will see that in my last recording. Okay, in my last recording, I mentioned about instructions, and we talk about instructions, and instructions also ties in with instruction for variation. So these things are actually together in that sense. There is some relationship there in terms of variation. So I did not actually talk about the variation aspects very long in the instruction sections under the pre-recorded lecture, the last pre-recorded lecture. And but we talked a little bit about it here, okay? So what is variation? Okay, so variation is a change order. Okay, so sometimes called change order, VO. So these are typical words that we use to name our practice, okay? And modification and amendments. So it will involve some modification and amendments to the original scope of work, okay, or the specifications in the contract, okay, in the project. And these instructions can arise due to many reasons, okay? I think we have a section here on why we have, causes here. So there will be, there are many people, if you read through literature, there will be fairly, a lot of things, that talks about variation. So normally we will have the typical issues that we will have is there's some errors and omissions in designs, and which is not there. Okay, and then of course client changing their minds is quite common as well. And so usually it will deal with some form of changes in the specification and scope, especially by the owner, and also design discrepancy. Normally, like I said, if you look at these causes for variation, we wouldn't put in contractors let's say they have done something wrong, and then in terms of quality, and then upon inspection you don't need to do rectification work, and that rectification work will include some form of variation. So that one we normally don't cover under variation, because that is a contractor's own problem, so they have to pay for it themselves, and then they have to foot the bill, they have to pay for the consequences. And then of course but if it's like a client's requirement and it's not very clear, and when we talk about variation, it has to be usually from the designers, the consultants, or the owner themselves. Okay, so that will be the typical reason that variation is called. But of course, if the contractor sees that there are certain things that is not being able to be done on site, which is some form of discrepancy with the design, so meaning that the actual situation on site that cannot be done, and we need some form of changes, that kind of changes, we can lump it under discrepancies with designs, or discrepancies with site information, and then or site information provided. Of course, you can also argue with the fact that you should have visited the site, but there are some things that cannot be detected visually as well during the site visit. So it's really you know, we cannot cover all the situations, but you know, you have to understand flow of event of every case, you know, and before we arrive at what is a yes, what is a no. Okay. And that is the job of a SO in that sense, to actually look into this kind of events, you know, whether it's legit or not legit, or it's just somebody trying to find more ways of getting more money out of the job, you know, kind of thing, you know, so, or, you know, cost savings and all that. So yeah, so it usually there will be categories of variations related to contractors, owner, consultant, but normally, you know, for the variation to be very, very typical, very very normal, it will be from the owner and the designer aspects that is related, that is a bit easier to get through. Okay. From the contractor ones, usually, like I said, you have to really look at the chain of events, you know, what's the things that's leading up to this potential change, you see, and then whether that falls under the category of client or consultant related. Yeah. And so any variation, okay, can actually be beneficial, meaning that, you know, it's positive. You need to change, you know, it will change the add-on, you know, it will add on to, I mean, we call it beneficial, but not necessarily beneficial in that sense. Yeah. But no matter what, when you do have variation, there will be some form of cost and also maybe time involved, and it's usually a headache, Usually it's a headache. So, but when we talk about positive variation, or we call it beneficial variation, it's usually an improvement, an enhancement. It's a necessary enhancement. It's a necessary improvement, and we also if you say, it will usually add to the project. I'll put it this way. And there are certain variation that is actually considered as detrimental, meaning that, you know, in the first place there's something wrong, you know, and then we need to do additional work, and that result in some form of negative change, meaning that, you know, changes, you know, to the work, you know, to the design, to the work and all that. So yeah, I mean, like, it's difficult to really make it really, really specific, but in the end, if you want to think about it, it's basically beneficial is the one that you can actually add value, you know, it will be better, but then it doesn't necessarily means that, you know, you can, it's always about adding money to the job, you know, I mean, like adding cost. That one is not really beneficial, you know, but then there will be things that you want to take out to make it better. Okay, so detrimental will be some form of taking out of something, you know, and then replacement or something. Yeah, and then that one is usually take the more negative tone in that sense, So I think this is some of the notes here is self-explanatory. So yeah, so these are definition of variation, and also talk about type of who causes the variation. And I think the most important thing here is we want to know about valuation of variation, and the procedures in terms of variation. But no matter what, beneficial or detrimental, at the end of the day, all variation will actually change scope of work. There will be some form of changes to the scope of work. You know, it can be addition, omission of work, it can be alteration, it can be changes in the design, it can be changes in the quality of material, it can be changes in the sequence, it can be changes in the timing. So these are all covered under the scope of variation. Okay, so variation are recognized as changes to the original scope of work. So it has to be some form of changes. It can be a substitution, meaning that replacement, so you don't have any negative or positive, like it's in and out, it's balanced, or you can have additional things, or you can have omission, taking out certain things from the scope of work. So again, if it's beneficial, then usually it will be adding value, it will be making the job better, it will be improving on the scope of work. If it's detrimental, it will usually be some form of problem related, and therefore you need to take out something and then, or you need to add in something, and that will actually increase the cost of the project and all that. So those are more on the detrimental effect of variation. So no matter what, it has to be assessed. Variation cannot be just like variation and then, because it makes changes to the scope of work. So when it makes changes to the scope of work, it should be dealt with care, a lot of care actually. Okay? And this is one very, very big components of any contract that we have in Malaysia. Okay, so for any variation to be valid at all, this is tied in with the instructions by SO. So it has to be an instructions to start off with first. Okay, so your SO on site needs to give that instructions for variation. Whether this is who induced it, it doesn't matter. Like contractor write in and say that, the pile cannot be found, the backup pile cannot be found, and I want it to be done. Can we do it with the RC piles, And it's a proposal, by the contractor. But because of that proposal, the contractor said that, I inform you already, then I go and change it. They cannot do that. So it has to be, in terms of the whole thing, has to be valid only upon written instructions from the SO. Okay, so if we look at the instructions bit of things in last lecture, which is in the pre-recorded, the very, very last recording, you would see that one of the instructions to be valid, it has to, normally you do have situation whereby instructions is verbal. So because it's an urgent situation, it's actually on site, and we're not going to have a laptop right then and there and type out instructions for you. Well, you can always put in a site daily record, some form of record, which is also in writing, but formally there must be some form of follow-up with writing. So many contracts, like especially JKR, PWD contract, I think all the clients are being very careful here. They don't want any SO to just say out and say, oh, you do this, you just change it, They don't want that. So what they want to say, there will be a written first policy, meaning that, you have to write in and even discuss with the client before you can write and give that proper instructions. So verbal instructions, they don't have to become, it is recognized, but it has to be followed up by a written instructions within a specific time frame. Usually 7 to 14 days, you must follow up with the written instruction for that VO to be valid. Okay, so for that instruction to be valid, and instruction is also like a precedent to a VO. Okay, so if you want to have a VO, it must come with instruction first. So this is the rule here. Okay, so for any VO to be valid, a written instruction or confirmation is necessary for a variation to be recognized and valued at later stage. So sometimes some SO, they have that wrong assumption that if I give instructions, then because we haven't done the valuation, so I don't want to give the instructions because the valuation is not done, then it would be very very weird to do that, but actually it is not. You have to give the instruction first and then ask the contractor to carry out not only the work, but to put in the proposal for any reduction or addition or any substitutions or any way to value that VO. It has to be subsequent usually, but the instructions must go first. Okay, so when you talk about valuing variations, so there will be a formal instructions in the first place, and based on that formal instructions, the contractor will respond. They will respond and say that, oh, okay, so contractor must also be very promptly in this sense. You cannot leave until I go and do a job first, and then after that, at the end of the project, I come up with this calculation, and then you're gonna have a lot of dispute with that. And then say, where did you get the cost from, and then how is this calculated and all that. So the right way is with that written instructions within certain amount of time as promptly as possible, as not to affect the timing for the job. Please carry out the response, by submitting the past quality time implication. If there's any addition, variation, reduction, you need to work it out, and then if you need more time, it has to be there. If there's any material issues or getting material that is related, it can be an issue that will be related to quality. It all has to be put forward as a sort of like a proposal. Okay, and then that will be assessed by the employer with, represented by the SO, to whether to approve, of that variation. Okay, this is the typical step 1, 2, 3 lah, and then of course the method of 1, 2, 3, and then you have the method of actually doing the variation. Okay, so of course typically it will be based on whatever rates that are applicable within the contract. So contract has many parts, many sections that has rates involved. So you have your summary of tender whereby there's rates there, and then you also have your schedules of rate at the back, that talks about different material, different rates, different parts, different rates, different people, different rates, different labor, different rate, day works, different machinery, different rates, So usually based on the contract rates, we make things easy. It will be by reference to similar items in the BQs, or if sometimes if it's government agency, then of course we will base it on their typical rates as well. And what contractor can propose, but then the variation of it, the actual valuation of it, it has to come from certain basis. Okay. The typical basis is, of course, going back to the contract itself to look for the numbers. And of course, if you can't find the numbers, then you will need to look at typical government agencies or typical industry benchmark numbers, and sometimes you might need to submit certain evidences, I suppose, to confirm on the associated costs, especially when it's dealing with addition. And there are certain cases where they take out the whole thing. It's like, let's say take out a whole component, and then the contract sum become really very, very low. Like how when we have summary of tender, we've got components A, B, C, D, E, F, and then certain parts is not done, and then it is wrong to say that they take out the whole components of it, and then we take out the whole from the BQ, we take out the whole component. So that will be a practice that is quite common, but sometimes contractor may dispute that and say that we pick out the whole thing. Some of my costs was actually embedded in my other costs is actually embedded into that component, and you're taking out too much, you see. So there are cases that go to court because of that, and then the court will have to judge whether it's reasonable or not. There's a case that whereby when they take out the whole thing from the BQ, it becomes like it reduces the contract by less than half of what it originally is, you see. So of course the other party, the contractor, don't agree, and therefore they go to court because of that, you see. So I think I put one of the cases down there as well, so you can take a look later. So of course, basing it on whatever contract, BQs are or schedule of rates are, these are all quite typical, and the contract itself, which is including the schedule of rates, the BQs, schedule of rates as well. And some form of agencies, authoritative agencies rate, that will be quite typical. And then of course we can also base it on consumer index, that kind of general pricing of certain goods and material, especially if those goods and materials are actually being governed by the government. So what is it called? The rates lah, some form of formal official rates by certain government agencies. So I think we can follow that as well. I think this is something that is quite shaky now, especially with all the tariff wars that's going on. So I think we're going to have some issues with a lot of things, with pricing of a lot of things very soon in a lot of contracts. Hopefully not. So engineers don't do variation now, if possible. Okay, and yeah, so there's variation with contract sum rates and prices within the contract itself. So this is one way of measuring the rates, using the rates. So this is used to determine the addition, substitution, and omission. Okay, so for remeasurement, normally we will look at the contract, the quantity as well. So if it's a remeasurement contract, which is not a lump sum contract, then we will look at the remeasurement, and then the quantity will be remeasured and then taken out accordingly or put in accordingly. So yeah. And of course, there is a variation with using a separate price schedule. So some contracts include a separate schedule rates for the purpose of variation. Okay, and but this rate normally, even if you say that it's not according to the contract itself, but when the contractor proposed the rate, they already have in mind that, you know, these are the typical rates that they would have already used in the contract itself. So the difference is not very big lah. But I would say a separate schedule is more for you know rates that is provided by certain agencies or other agencies. I think that one would be a bit more more differentiating lah with the contract based rate lah. So you put it very simply lah, you can value your rates based on either the ones that is in the contract or a separate schedule which is out of the contract. Okay. So usually the rates from the out of the schedules one, there are typical ones are like the item itself or the resources based one that is like plant machineries, labor, they will have a certain day rates, hourly rates, and you know, and this will actually be used in that sense. So this method will provide some form of flexibility. Some form of flexibility, but it's also quite challenging as well in that sense. Of course, basing it in a contract one will be the easiest, but of course, no choice. This has to be hand in hand in that sense. Okay, so so this one here, okay, valuation of omission. Yeah, so this is the case that I was talking about. You know, this is about, you know, omission usually is a bit, yeah, I mean, it may sound very straightforward. You omit things under the traditional BQ-based contract, you know, and you just take out the portion of it that is tied to the omitter. Oh, what is so difficult about that, you know? So this is what we always think, you know. But then if there is also other rates, you know, involved within the schedule itself, I mean, within the contract itself, then the omissions can be contentious. So it'll be a situation whereby they will say that we want to base it on taking out the whole portion from the BQ, or you want to recalculate that based on the schedule of rates. So this is a situation whereby there's a case here. This is a Hogarth, you know, versus this Aeon Climate Renewable company, and then, you know, the omission of a specific checkup batch, you know, was priced using a daily rate from variation schedule is 150. This is a UK case, so 150 pounds, 150,000 pounds per day, and the employer argued that should be deducted across 160 days. You know, so this guy contractor, of course, don't agree to that. You know, 150,000 times by 160 days. You imagine how much of the contract is taken out. You know, so then this highlighted that the variation, okay, schedule often price the cost of doing extra work, not the savings from omitting. The variation schedule often price the cost of doing extra work. So this is saying that, I'm putting that rate there, to say that if I need to do extra work, this is the cost, but then the client actually use it to take out the whole, the whole part of the work, because of they want to have that exact work. So based on the timing of that work, they actually took out, like, they decided to say 160 times by 150,000 pounds per day, which is the rate that the contractor actually put in to say that if there's any additional work, I'll be taking that rate of 160 per day to do additional work. And then, that becomes like a big issue. So the court actually was actually leaning towards the contractor's way, not the client's way of doing that. So they lean towards valuing omissions using the contract sum built up rather than rigidly applying the schedule of rates, which is especially when the result is really very unjust in that sense. So again, I want to mention, this is something that actually I want to mention at the end of the class, but I think it's good time to mention here as well, that, even though contracts do have a lot of sentences, have a lot of clauses, terms and conditions that protect different parties on this, it spells out the rights and responsibilities of the parties. But many contracts are not drafted based on project basis, meaning that I sit down, one party propose a contract and the other party read the contract very carefully, and then they counter propose before they sign, and then it makes it into a very fair kind of contract. So at the end of the day, when you have a contract that use standard forms, and standard forms are written by authoritative bodies, such as PWD, which is JKR, Public Works Department, and then, like tax and engineers, and of course CIDB is another body that writes our standard forms. So you see, they are generally can be a bit client friendly, so that makes some form of misuse and abuse sometimes can come into the picture. So it does not mean that, when you write certain things in a contract, you want to practice it in certain ways that you think is actually contract beneficial to you as one of the party in a contract. It's not as simple as that. If the contractor or the other party do contest that, and then end up going for dispute resolution, I think many of these contracts here can actually be revoked, and they will be scrutinized again. And at the end of the day, it is really based on fair practice. Like, what is the fair practice? That in this case, even though it sounds contractually right to do this thing, but when the contractor contests and it goes to court, when it's involving a lot of money, it's like we times it 160 times 150,000. I mean, I'm not even saying it's pound, even if it's Malaysian ringgit, it's a lot of money. So I mean, it is worthwhile to go to court, So, and then in the end, the court actually do lean towards normal, practice, whereby the outcome is practical, really how long to do the job, really how long to what resources you need to build up to the cost, and then we take up that cost, not just a rate times by 160 days, So even though legally, contractually, the client can do that, So I think this is a good thing for everybody to remember, that practice is actually always at the forefront of things, like how practical, how reasonable, that you are practicing is more important than what exactly is written in the contract. Contract is the last resort, it's the last thing. It is there as a safeguard. It's like it's a police wear bulletproof, you don't really want to use that bulletproof at the end of the day, to to test whether the bulletproof actually works, you see. Jackets or whatever, helmet, or you don't want to test it, you just want to be reasonable, be very careful in doing your work, not to just to see that I've got it on and therefore I can run around like a mad guy on, with my guns around and then get shoot and because I've got a bulletproof. So again, contract is like that. You don't take it like your ultimate shell and then, this is all written like this, or, I'm at advantage and therefore I can practice whatever I want and, abuse your power or, various things, especially engineers, because we do have that dual role, remember? Okay, so I think I will talk about that a little bit later because I do have some notes down there on that. So yeah, so make sure that, of course, it's important that our contract do differentiate, whether how the variation is addition, how is it calculated, omissions, how is it calculated. It should be allowed for flexibility and fairness and not just I need to squeeze more things out of that variation. Nobody wants variation, I mean, if there's a variation, it usually would mean something is not right, something is not going on right, like maybe client changes their mind, they want to add on certain things, and we change things, when the work is ongoing already. So, or the design is some issues, or the work on sites, you got the information not tally, and therefore we need to, change the work. So, how we evaluate that, it has to be done with pay, but not all contract will have a very specific SOP on how to do the variation and how to actually value, and then how the procedures in doing variation and the valuation of the variation. So again, I think the principle of fairness and practice, and we cannot take variation as savings or making more money out of the job. Contractor alike as well, they cannot think of variation as, oh my god, this is my chance to make more money out of it. I mean, it's not that simple, I think. And then of course the client side that, this is one way of I don't want to pay more, but I want it to change, kind of mentality. So again, the practice has to be basing it on the principle of whether it's really necessary. I think they'll be the first questions that we have to answer first, and then follow on by what is the way of doing it that is actually there within the contract, so we follow accordingly. And then while we are practicing what is there, what the SOP and all that, or the steps, of procedures of running through the variation, we also have to remember our practice have to be flexible and fair in that sense. I think that would be the principle that we want to adopt when it comes to variation in practice. So, okay, so yeah. So I think this one is to promote better transparency in terms of variation. And of course, I think the variation also has another issue that what I mentioned just now is it comes a bit too late. So some SO, when they're very inexperienced, they will actually think that, it has to be valued at the same time. So they don't give the instructions for variation until it's too late. So they tie in that valuation together with the instructions. And then so they don't give the instructions and the valuation until the very, very end of the project. Or supposed to get this all settled before the work ongoing. But on site, it can be valid. They do the thing first and then do the paperwork later, which is very typical. But I think that one is there is a room for this. I mean, you will create a chance, opportunity for dispute later on, in terms of time, in terms of cost as well. Not only time. I mean, not only cost, not only omissions are very, not only people don't agree on the amount of money taken out or amount of money that is being added. The time is also a very big issue because variation is definitely an EOT related reason. It's one of the relevant reasons for EOT. So if we don't value, if we don't get the procedures done as early as we can, be responsive about all this, then we may end up having things all tied up. And it's just like EOT as well, and variation, and also um, all these instructions can come a bit late, towards the end of the project, and that again is putting yourself up, putting yourself up for potential. Uh, okay? But of course, cannot be no, nobody is that efficient all the time. I would say, so again, we want to promote. Hopefully, the contract that we have. I mean, honestly, like I said, I've studied contract for all my life, all my career in research. Basically, none of the contract in Malaysia are actually applicable. It's actually none of the standard forms are really is applicable in that sense. And many things do have a lot of loopholes. When I first do contracts 30, 20 years ago, we're still using PWD, that PW 75, which is written like post independence, all the way up until I think 2000 or something like that, whereby we got a renewal in JKR form. So can you imagine? And then now it's already 20 over years from the last renewal. And yeah, we do have a lot of additional things coming out, like they're putting additional things, but there's no formal revision as well. And many of the other contract forms are the same as well. So again, things are moving, constructions, engineering are always being creative, always moving forward, but our contract are not really following up as well. And that is quite common. And of course, the writing within the contract itself is already all, internationally, we're all veering towards easy to understand language, not legal terms, and not the legal jargon all the way. And then, but we are not, you see, we're still having a lot of legal language in our contract. And, things are changing. What I'm saying is things are changing, eras are changing, but our contract are not really catching up. So if you're really saying that we want to follow the contract to the tilt, we must respect contract. It's there. You must respect what is the rights and obligations, responsibilities of the parties involved. I think there's a basic respect and knowledge that we must have for our contract. That is very important. I think we must don't say because it's out of there and therefore I don't need to know. See, so that is wrong also. So you need to know. But when it comes to the treatment of being an engineer, working in a project, working in the industry, I think the practice of fairness, practice of equitable treatment, how we look at contract, and merge it with practice. We must do it with some common sense, and some form of logic, put it this way, and then be holding up that principle of natural justice in that sense. Because in the end, if dispute happens, you go for dispute resolution, and even all the way up to litigation or even adjudication. I think there will be situations where, even the judge will look at it and say, hello, come on, what is this? I mean, I've been through some of the litigation cases. I mean, the judges are actually quite fair in that sense as well. Say, this is really unfair, and then the outcome is unjust in that sense, and they will actually scrutinize the clauses and find that they can use their own treatment towards the case. You see, you don't necessarily base it on the contract at the end of the day. So it is very possible. Okay. So it's just like you're not really holding, when you have a contract, you're not really holding on to the ultimate weapon in that sense. So far, any questions? Can I just get my charger for my laptop? Let's. Early Saturday morning, everybody is very quiet normally. Okay, right. So yeah, so that is with variation and ties in with instructions. And if I were to open my note again for part 3, you will also see that, you know, for instructions, there is also what we call power that is given to the SO, whether they are delegated powers from the client. So it does not mean that SO as a client representative are a total representation of the client in that sense. Okay, they are, the power are here. It covers instructions, okay, it covers certification, it covers assessing and approving of variation. So if you say that the instructions is still under SO, but I think, as you know, all the practice is you must also, before you issue the instructions for variation, you must have some form of approval from the client as well, okay? And of course, the final approval of VO and extension of time, you can access, you know, and give recommendation for approval or not non-approval. That is the power delegated from the client, but the final approval will still come from the client, okay? So calling for testing, inspections, these are the powers that are generally delegated to the SO. But again, you must look at your contract, because we're covering quite a lot of contract here. So we are summarizing Malaysia alone. Okay, we have like 5. That is quite commonly used. PWD, which is always for the federal. This is contract form on general conditions of contract, which covers most contractual matters. So this is like a one-size-fits-all T-shirt that everybody can use. So you have JKR, which is mainly used in Sarawak. And then you have PWD, which is basically for the federal funded projects. And then you also have high-end form of contract. You also have CIDB, you also have PAM forms. These are the 5 typical, very, very common forms that you will see. And of course, if you work for different agencies, they may have their own forms as well. Like in Sarawak, if you do work for SEB, they will have their own forms as well. SEB totally use their own form. If you go for international contract, sometimes they will use FIDIC. So most contractors coming from international or you know, it's an international kind of project, using international counterparts, whether it's international clients or international contractors, local clients, they can go for FIDIC, okay? And also some other international contracts. So you see, we have a lot of contracts here, actually. I mean, to learn and to know. And they all don't say the same thing, you know, they all can vary from one another. Their coverage are all different as well. I mean, similar, they'll cover similar issues, but the fine points of it is like how many days are, or some contract is more procedural, you know, some is not so procedural, especially the government contract. I'm pretty sure JBUP and water boards and all that, they are basing it on JKR sort of form of contract. And do you guys also have your own contract now? Probably do also in some projects. Some agencies, they will create their own contract forms. And a lot of West Malaysia agencies, they have their own contract form as well. And some big companies, like huge organizations, they will have their own contract forms because they are so big that, you know, many people do business with them, like maybe huge developers and all that. So they can use their own standard form of contract, which is usually borrowed from some of this contract here, and then they modify it and then make it their own standard forms. Or they can modify it from international contract like FIDIC as well. And yeah. So you're still using PWD formula. Yeah, okay. Sometimes you use the PWD 203, which is the federal funded. Then you also have your own JKR. We also have our own JKR form. So again, all this form is not exactly all government form I'm pretty sure you all agree will be a bit more client friendly. Whether you're dealing with a consultancy agreement or whether you're dealing with a contractors agreement, they are all generally sided more geared towards government agencies or the client bodies. So if you use their forms in private projects, then it's still very client friendly in that sense. Yeah. Okay, so that is talking about VOs, VOs and instructions related to VOs. Okay, and then other things, I think this one I will go through it later. This is smaller things. These are all smaller things. Maybe you all will be very concerned with suspension of work. Okay. These are the few things that are bigger that I think most people will be more concerned with suspension of work and termination, these two things. I think this is really the final big things are variation, suspension, and termination are the three big things that we will finish up with, but the rest is actually smaller things. Okay, which you are aware and which you may not be aware, I don't know. Okay, so suspension of work is generally understood as a cessation, okay, means stopping of construction activities. Before, it's not a termination, but it's a temporary stop. Okay, and this temporary stop is usually because there is an event or unforeseen circumstances like force majeure and also acts of God that is actually beyond the control of the parties. Okay, so you must base a suspension of work on this principle and not on other things like, oh, contractor not doing their job, not doing the non-conformance, not doing the rectification, and therefore you get angry and you want to suspend the work, It's not like that, okay? But the broad umbrella of suspension usually has to be under that beyond control of the party initiating the suspension. Okay, so there is no right here. Okay, there's no common law right for a contractor to suspend work. Okay, unfortunately. Okay, if the suspension, so that would tell you that suspension of work legally can only be done by the client. So beyond the control of the party initiating the suspension is usually beyond the control of the client. Okay. So if you say that suspension of work, contractors generally they have no right to suspend work. Okay, so they cannot just pack up and go and leave the site and say, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back until you do this. So they cannot do that. Okay. So if you're a contractor, please don't do that. It's a bit dangerous. It's really dangerous for you. Okay. So but suspension can be, usually suspension is carried out, in terms of contract. Okay. In terms of contract. So there may be clauses within contract that will list out the what's my format running off like this? Okay, the contractual terms, okay, will usually be something like what kind of circumstances that you can suspend work, and then it will notice you will require some form of written notice for suspension. So meaning that when you have this written notice, it's not only like a one-time warning or one-time notice. It will usually be, a field notice if it's dealing with some defaults. But if it's dealing with unforeseen circumstances, such as, like flooding, and then such as, the pandemic the other day, that one is really a very big thing. Under the whole thing was under suspension of work. The contract was not terminated, but people were asked to leave the site due to MCO, and that. So then there will be procedures to resume work, supposedly, and then also the suspension usually will be directed by the client or the SO, okay, or dealing with usually it's dealing with unforeseeable event that is beyond the control of the client, and there no choice. I have to call the stop. You guys have to leave the site almost ASAP, and that one is typical of how the suspension is done now. When the suspension is there, okay, you can, in certain circumstances, it means that time is halted as well. Time is halted as well. So it does not mean that the time is still ongoing and then you have suspension. That's why I said it may not always impact the project's completion timeline. Okay. And not all suspension entitle the contractor to compensate, to get compensation and time extension. So these are the 2 points that we have to be very clear with, huh? Before I go to this, looks on. Okay. These are the typical grounds for suspension. Typical ground is contractor external event, which is supposed to be first. I think I should put this first, otherwise people will get confused. Okay, so this is a typical most important thing, you know, that we can activate suspension. And maybe it can be due to like certain war, civil war policies, you know, some form of strikes. These are very, very unforeseen, I mean, very, very critical event that is external. We will activate that pandemic, and then change in the law. Maybe there are some form of you know, government issues or whatever, you know, like the other day, Korea certainly had that, you know, certainly had that darurat thing, you know, and, you know, things like that. So we have that kind of, it gives that room for client to say, okay, let's, you know, everybody just stay at home and don't come to site, you know, so we just suspend the work. So again, SO and client can trigger suspension if you fail to perform the work with due diligence. And this is something that you be very, very careful, okay? I really don't want to put it here. These two, I really, really don't want to put it here. And I know the moment I put it here, then there's going to be a lot of things that we need to look into, you see. I mean, you can, especially if it is written in the contract, okay? Statutorily, you know, you don't have that by the contractor, okay? But if contractually, you know, common law don't say the contractor can suspend work. It usually means client can suspend work in a contract. But, you know, it has to be due to their own problem. Like, let's say they're having financial difficulties or they're facing bankruptcy or they're being sued for something, you know, something, or external reasons. These are typical grounds of suspension that is clearer, cleaner, and that is something, you know, that is easier to manage. But if you say that contractors failure to perform, if some contracts put it there within the contract, you know, provision that says that SO and client can trigger suspension, you know, some younger engineers may treat this like really like a very happy thing, you know, anything, anytime the contractor are not performing, you know, they will, you know, throw in that I suspend the work, I will suspend the work, I will write in, and, you know, and suspend your work. Or the contractor failed to rectify certain things within a certain period of time, and then after notification, they haven't renewed. I mean, they haven't do the improvement, and then you get pissed off, you know, and then so you want to do the suspension. So that's it. If it's there, you have the right to do so, but it must be done. But you know, some of these contracts are very, very annoying in that sense that they give you that right, but they don't give you that procedures to do it. You see, so some contract will say that okay, you can have, you know, you can do suspension, but there isn't really, they will say that with written notification. So with this written, I mean, it has to be with written. There is a notice requirement for any, you know, generally there will be something like, you know, you have to come up with some written notification. But you know, like, is one time enough? You know, like, why do you want to suspend the work just like that? See, and then there will be procedures. You know, there should be a clear-cut SOP to follow, that both parties understand this SOP before you can trigger this suspension. So I would say that, you know, if you really want, if the contract don't have that steps of doing the suspension, I mean, like triggering suspension and then executing a suspension, especially under the failure to perform works, because this failure to perform works is a very big category. And then what is the assessments of the failure to perform? There is one issue here. What is the assessments of due diligence to be fair here? You see, it means like if you say due diligence, I've got like 50 guys on site, I've got like 5 machineries running. You can't say that I'm not working with due diligence. You see, so again, what is the real trigger? What can be the trigger should be very clear, and then the SOP should have that trigger, should have that notification, should have not to say the amount of time to notify, but usually we would say repeatedly, not, after a few notifications, you still haven't get the things done. And then the effect of not doing that work, then that will be a failure, because, or some form of threat to safety or time or following subsequent work, overall performance, overall integrity of the work. I think that would be more reasonable, and less troublesome. I mean, less dispute related later on if you trigger it based on that sort of procedures. So again, when you trigger, both parties must know, both parties must know, and don't use the word suspension very lightly, as in just come out to the contractor and say, I'm going to suspend your work, and then how, then the contractor really don't come to site, and then how, there'll be a lot of issues, so don't work based on anger. So there must be some form of procedures, like I say, proper definition of what can trigger, and then normally when you want to suspend underperformance, it has to be some form of threat, some form of detrimental effect to the overall project integrity. They don't perform, repeatedly don't perform, the notice, the repetition, and that will affect subsequent project, that will affect the quality, that will affect, that have serious consequences. And then of course the due diligence, it's really difficult to say, when a contractor has enough people working on site, you cannot be demanding that, and you must have 100 to be saying that you are diligent, you see. So what is that due diligence? Is if they're meeting the schedule, or if there's a slightly delay and they're applying for extension of time, they are still doing their due diligence. It does not mean that they're not doing due diligence. Maybe some project you only need like let's say pipeline or drainage work, you only have 10, 15 people on one stretch working. It does not mean that it's not enough. You've got one machinery, that's all you need, then that is already due diligence. So you cannot just use the word very loosely. Just be careful when you come to that. Non-payment by client is something that I also don't like it to be put here, because actually it's not, you cannot do that. If it's expressed within the contract, well, that's fine, but non-payment by the client, okay, non-payment by the client, it does, it is very fishy. It's very, very fishy. Because first and foremost, if the contractor trigger suspension because of the non-payment, solely because of non-payment, okay, normally without the terms, without the contractual provision, the contractor cannot do that. So you will see that in most contracts, there's no provision for that. If you look at PWD and JKR form, I don't think there's any provision for contractor to suspend the work due to non-payment. Okay, so if there's a very nice contract somewhere that has that, saying that okay, contractor can suspend the work. Again, it's not so easy. You cannot just write in and say that, oh, you haven't paid me for 6 months already and I suspend my work. Okay. You have to first start off from asking for payment. So meaning that there is a payment delay, there must be a very, very clear notification, documentation of submission of claims, and how long the delay is, and then how much effort have you put in to actually get them to remind the client to pay. So all the reminder notice also have to be there as well. Okay. for the client to, for the contractor to say the client is identifying, we are identifying the client is not paying, okay? So then you can say that, if you still don't pay me within another period, a cure period, then we will activate suspension. But the thing is, when you activate suspension and then you don't come to work, okay, and suddenly maybe a month later the client pay you, okay, and then they ask you to come back to work. So this time that you've already delayed, you don't come to work for 1 month, does it count? Can you apply for EOT? And the client side will definitely say no, I'm not giving EOT. So then whatever that is being, the time that is being suspended will be an issue that will pop up in EOT and LAD later then. So what is the proper, you need to have that documentation on the mitigation of delay and what are the cost, loss, and expenses involved here. Okay, so for them to demobilize and mobilize and all that. So normally non-payment, and then the client side will have that excuse coming back to say that for that 1 month, they will take videos of that 1 month that nobody is working on site. And they can easily now suspend you and say that you have not done your work with due diligence. So again, it's like interesting situations whereby if we all know our contract, both can be, both can be smart, smart about it, but both can be running into trouble with it as well. So I say I do not like to put it there, that too, but it can be a bite me, bite you, bite me kind of thing that can create more problems. So suspension of work, like I said, do it because it's actually no choice. I think it's better that way rather than client activating because of due diligence, because of not performance, and then if you really certify they're not performing, just go and do the termination. Don't do suspension. Okay. And then if you're really, really not paying, if you're not receiving payment, just go and terminate the contract. Do the termination rather than go into suspension. These are go for them in the contract directly, and then go for termination. Don't allow suspension. It gives more headache. Because if suspension can have a lot of issues, it can have like extension of time issues. It can leave rise to claim loss and expenses because you're idling your resources, and demobilization and remobilization costs. So let's say if we have pandemic, and then the work was suspended. So before the work was actually triggered, suspension, I think the client side must have that, must also propose a renewal plan, meaning that how to come back, how to reactivate the work. And then also you must in the document when you suspend the work on site to put in there for this reason, extension of time will be calculated or not calculated. So it has to be all clearly stated in that suspension documents that you furnish to the other party. Okay, I think not I think I mean like this is from what I know about the contract. I think it's better that way. I think during the pandemic, because the suspension was very, very sudden, very, very urgent, and I think most of the work was suspended just like that. And there wasn't any follow-ups on any of the proper procedures that is dealing with suspension. When the work was recovered, there was a lot of issues with many, many, many things, such as price escalation, such as mobilization, remobilization costs, such as contractor having certain damage that is done. That is done because of demobilization. That is done because nobody's on site. Maybe some of the work was damaged by weather, because the MCO was quite long in that sense, and then it was a few months, I think, and then there was other things such as new procedures on like the social distancing and all sorts of things. And then so you see, I think a lot of government contract at that time was actually in delay. I mean, like when it was recovered, when time was reactivated and many extension of time, we weren't sure whether we should give extension of time or not. And then we weren't sure whether we can pay for loss and expenses or not. And because of this weren't sure, a lot of government agencies weren't sure of how to manage all these things. So in the end, the delay was quite substantial for a lot of projects. And then, and then EOT was not given, payment was delayed. So these are all the effects of suspension when it's not procedurally dealt with in the right way. I mean, in the proper procedures format. Yeah. So we will trigger suspension. All contract may be saying in that few paragraph or in that one or two clause about suspension, but this one or two clause can be so brief. There is no proper procedures associated with it. But like I say, there's nothing wrong with the client agencies and SO to create that suspension procedures, to make sure that both sides agree on that, like not to say agree on that, but at least both sides know, this is the time that we can call for it. And if we call for it, these are the procedures that we are going to be activating. And that can make, next things easier. So I mean, suspension is another thing that we need to look at very carefully. A lot of things we need to re-look at in all of our contract actually, and this is one of them, especially now we have, we went through pandemic. It does not mean that there'll be no more pandemic for the rest of our life. There could be other things like that, it could be earthquakes, it could be force majeure, it could be strikes, it could be labor problems. It can be very other that now the tariffs problem. There's another issues here, that is dealing with price escalation and all that. So you see, there are many things that can be external and that can actually trigger suspension of works, and so I think it's better if we can get the procedures built out carefully. With the right procedures, I think the way that we activate it is less disputable in that sense. Less contestable. So yeah, I mean like what I said, importance in meeting in doing the procedures and paperwork from both the client and contractor side. So contractors must follow the procedures, they must identify the impact, you must document this is something that contractor can do when you're being served with a suspension notice. Okay, there is some suggestion on how court actually treats suspension. Okay, and this is a very interesting case whereby these are Kasen Construction versus Celsing Development. This one, they are doing suspension based on non-payment. And it was held as follows. In my opinion, in the absence of a specific provision in contract, which means the contract is served between these two guys, this contractor and this developer. The contractor is suspending the work because of non-payment. Okay, so basically there is no automatic right to suspend the work simply because one or two payment certificates have not been paid. You see, so again, you see the court actually talk about suspension. I mean, this is under this case of Kaseng. So, well, the contractor has no ground. There's no specific provision is one thing, and then because it's only one or two certificates not being paid, so you cannot just suspend the work. So that goes back to me saying that thing again. Don't try to suspend work using the excuse of non-payment. If me as a contractor, if a contractor asks me, I would say, even if you're not happy with the payment not being paid, you need to keep a certain amount of people working on site. You can work a bit slower, you can be a bit dilly-dallying, you can pull out some of your machineries, you can pull out some of the people, but make sure that you are still seen to be working. Don't just straight away gung-ho, and say suspend, you see. So I think there are cases that you cannot win in court even that, for that reason. Okay. And this is not a local case. Builder that there are generally rules whereby contractor is entitled to suspend his operation. Yeah, so failure to pay. So in this case, this is an overseas contract, so they do have that. Okay. There is generally whereby contractor entitled to suspend his operations on failure to pay, quite apart from the term of the contract. So this judge is saying that, we are quite satisfied that there are no legal basis on which suspension of work could be justified in this case again. Okay. So similar result is met as well. Similar result is from other cases as well. Okay, so when he states the contractor response to actual alleged breaches of contract by the owners by suspending the work and delivery going slow are extremely perilous. So even though deliberately going slow, you see, even if I want to be smart also, you have to be careful. Okay. Yeah, so I think many cases here, okay, so there is no proper writing, okay, in terms of suspension of work in contract due to non-payment. Okay. I think the summary I hear, as you see, Malaysian court confirmed that contract has no common law right to suspend work solely based on non-payment unless this right is expressly in the contract. Suspension in the absence of such clause may amount to a breach by contractor. You see? So contractor, be very, very clear. If you attend this class, open your eyes. Don't suspend the work because of even if there is clauses within the contract that says that you can, please be careful and follow the procedures. You don't want to be countered sued later on. So if you are facing that, breach, just go for termination, not suspension. Let's see if there's any other cases that is more interesting.
Dr. Ting,
Yes.
in case of there's layers of contract, for example, the owner, the contractor, and subcontractor. The owner already paid the payment, but somehow it was stuck at the contractor, and the subcontractor suffer lah. So in this case, can the owner directly pay to the subcon?
This is the thing that we will speak about later on in subcontracting. Okay? Subcontracting. If you are nominated, yes, you can, but if you are not, you cannot. To put it very simply, Yeah. So again, you see, by suspending the work without valid cause, a plaintiff, which is the contractor, has in fact repudiate means to breach the contractual obligation. So again, I think this one here, we have many cases hereby. We already said to you many cases on suspension due to non-payment. This is very specific on this legal position on suspension due to non-payment. Court normally do not want to entertain it in that sense, unless that non-payment is if it's a breach already, then just directly go for termination. Don't alang. I will also try to find some cases to see if there's any cases on termination due to contractor's performance. Like I said, external force majeure and external events, and also the client's own problems such as financial difficulties and also bankruptcy and all that. I think that one is also that is easier. But then if we talk about these two, 1 and 2, we should highlight this. This one here is a little bit difficult as well. The hardest is this non-payment. So last bit is okay. Ultimately, goal of suspension is address unexpected and unforeseen issue during the course of the project, and to ensure that both parties are able to fulfill the obligation under the contract. This is like a temporary remedy. It's to help, it's to help you not to create a new contract in the future, re-tender and all that. Stick to the current contract, we suspend the work for now. So again, it must be due to very serious consequences, like I said, then we can call for that. I think with the contractor's performance bit, it has to be severe consequences that is resulting from that non-performance or lack of performance or that lack of due diligence. Okay. So honestly, the rules are harsh. Okay, it will be, we will say that it's generally harsh on contractor when it comes to suspension. And, the court actually justify this rule, why we want to be harsher here, because to allow the contractor to suspend the work would in reality enable contractor to assert, powerful tactical pressures on employers in pursuit of possibly unwarranted and inflated claim, and to muscle their way through disputes with threats and actual acts of suspension. Okay. So again, if the SO and client also activate that, the same rules actually do apply. Unless the project do have some certain serious consequences, because they are the owner of the project. So, we also do not want them to behave in such a way that they are pulling the threats all the time and say that if you don't do this, I will suspend your work. If you don't do this, I'll suspend your work. And then if I suspend your work later on, you need to, I won't give you EOT, there will be issues later on, blah, 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 blah. So you are actually also, if you allow the client to give the right to suspend work based on this, you are actually being very client-friendly as well. The consequences, the ultimate goal of suspension, like I said, is supposed to be for unforeseen events. It's actually to remedy something. It's actually to put a stop so that we can find a solution for a better thing, not put a stop to be a threat, So for contractor, you cannot use it as a threat. For client, also, you don't use it as a threat when it comes to performance as well. So as such, because of that, the project could be held ransom in that sense, It's like at the end of the day, things will not be working out, and it will become a very serious consequences whereby easily some people are calling for anybody, two party here is like two big children here, screaming to each other, I want to suspend, I want to suspend, I want to suspend, so they have to be treated with a lot of care, I would say that we also should be harsh on clauses that is dealing with client or client for SO suspending the work that is due to performance. Again, same rule should be imposed as well, because if we don't, you can impose that, but with substantial procedures, with proper reasons being stated in the contract, I think would be more reasonable for, we don't have to take it up completely from the client side based on performance of contractor, but it has to be tightened. Okay, it has to be tightened. Otherwise, the same thing will happen. It will become just a threat. It will become, disputable. It will become contestable, and that kind of situation. Okay, and termination. Okay, it's a very interesting topic. So actually interesting, but it's not exactly difficult to understand. It's actually a little bit more straightforward in that sense. It only deals with what are the reasons for terminations, and then after that, what is the subsequent actions follow up, and then what is the valuation of the work, and then ultimately, upon termination, you have to pay the contractor all the work that has been done. That one you cannot escape one. Okay. So termination for a cause, when it's really like termination based on breach, so the non-defaulting party can end the contract. So employer can end the contract because of did not proceed with due diligence. There's a lot of remedial of defective work. Did not pay the subcontractors. This is something that is I have to be a bit more strict about that now, because it's about contractor not paying, the workers, subcontractors, and all that. But if we say direct payment, it has to be nominated subcontractor. And contractor not complying with some legal requirement, or some delay, a huge amount of delays, very, very bad delays, that kind of situation, then we will have failure. These are failure to do certain things, But that delay has to be very substantial. So PWD will terminate the contractor who default and fail to do remedy work within a specific period of time. Upon termination, contractor forfeits any entitlement for further payment until works are completed by others and is potentially liable for additional of completion of cost. That is what is written in the contract. Okay. Again, like I said, practice with K. Contractor may also terminate the cost commonly due to non-payment. So you can terminate if you fail to pay. So again, go for termination, not suspension. Or if there's a prolonged termination, okay, or failure to provide financial backing, okay, or prolonged suspension not attributable to contractor, then contractor can call for this is a breach. These are the few really breach, of contract. And termination of for convenience means that typically client need to terminate the contract, abort or revise because of certain issues. Okay, not necessarily contractor's problem. They can have they have their own issues to terminate for convenience. And usually this would be terminate for public interest. This is a termination, this is a typical termination, meaning that there may be a change in law or something like that, and then better not proceed with it anymore. Then they practice termination based termination for convenience. Okay. Public interest. So you will see in many of these contracts, even general contract, you will see that the government or the client can terminate the contract for public interest. Okay. This is dealing with general legislative changes or there are issues with external issues, then they can terminate terminate for convenience. So this one here, contractors are entitled for demobilization for any leftover of cost, that is up to where you work. Okay, so they will calculate, need to calculate the amount that has to be paid. So the contractor will be compensated. They'll be paid, and then you can also ask for compensation. Okay, on certain demobilization or certain portion of loss of profit and all that. Again, this one has to be studied between the two parties. So the SO representing the client will actually track all the paperwork, and make sure that the amount that is compensated, or the work done, or the material on site that is already there but not put up yet has to be paid accordingly. So again, in the end, whatever that is signed, the amount that is paid has to be agreed upon by the both parties, but the contractor is entitled for money compensation. Okay, because of termination by convenience. Termination by mutual agreements means that both parties say, okay, you don't want to do, I don't want to do, okay, let's not do it. So we both agree, even the contract is still ongoing, both of you just don't want to do anymore because maybe it's because of reason like maybe houses cannot sell, you know, and then there may be budget constraints, development is not working out, you know, it's better to stop right then and there. So potentially is there some voluntary, it's agreed upon. Doesn't matter what reason, but if it's agreed upon, both agree that this is not the right time to continue with this project, even though we've already signed the contract, even though we've already maybe done some piling work, and then we realize that it's really, really bad economy. Things are not, it's going to be terrible in the next few years or next few months. We both agreed to terminate. Yeah, that will be termination by mutual agreements. Okay, so they will terminate at a certain date, and then there will be settlement of accounts. So any outstanding payments, it is treated like the end of the project, basically. It's treated like the end of the project. So it's not, there's no completion, but it's just treated like the end of the project. So then whatever that is there, it has to be paperwork, everything has to be hand over very properly. So this is the type of termination that you're not screaming at each other, not trying to kill each other. So it's quite mutual kind of thing. It's agreed upon. Termination for impossibility and impracticability, this is because of some natural events. It's pretty much similar with the other one, the public interest one. So mutual agreement, you can do that. So yeah, these are similar. The last one is termination by performance. So performance is basically means that both of you, your all payment made already, you know, you've done your work. It's a very ideal outcome. This is really what we call completion. Okay, so there is nothing nothing hoo-ha about this. So proper accounts are made, you know, certificates are made, deferred liability started, you know, and then full completion will be at the end of deferred liability and all that. Additional consideration, regardless of any type of termination, several principles will apply. Okay, these are the typical principle will apply. Standard forms preserve payment obligation after termination. So means that if we activate termination, there will be amount that will be paid to the contractor. If the contractor is entitled for payment. Okay. Not in local standard form, for subcontractor assignment, meaning that this is not expressed in our law, so meaning that there's no clauses here that says that supposed to be you have to reassign your subcontractor, you know, so you're happy to deal with the subcontractor. So it's not really in our contract, but it is in some contract overseas. Consequential versus liquidated damage. Most Malaysian contracts include LAD for delays, but exclude consequential damage through mutual waivers. Okay. Okay. What is this about again? Sorry. Exclude consequential damage. So yes, consequential damage is like if you have that termination, then there is no specific clauses that, you know, available that talks about consequential damage, you know, in the event of termination. Okay. Malaysia actually don't have many remedial action in that sense. SIPA is one way for the unpaid people to chase their payment. Okay. So yes, so if there's any time limits also in terms of contract, let's say after termination, within how long you must submit your termination claims and all that, make sure that you submit within certain time bars certain time bars, contractually they may have certain time bars. If certain time bars is not there, then you must follow some statutory time bars. So if there's a statutory time bars, then you must claim the incident period of time. It cannot be an open-ended thing that is going on forever. Okay, for your claim to be made after termination. So these are some of the things that you need to be just some consideration, things that you need to think about. But generally, if you say termination, there are reasons for termination, and under different reasons for termination, there are different actions to be taken. But those actions will usually be either the time frame. So after a certain period of time, you cannot terminate like today, say tomorrow terminate. So there will be a time frame given in the termination notice, maybe within 30 days, within 14 days, some sort of like a preparation for the other party to pull out and to agree upon. And then after that, you agree upon that time, so you move out. So before you move out, or after you move out, there is a certain period of time that you need to work on the valuation of the work that's been done, the material that's put on site. Depending on the type of termination that we're going for, except for breach, rest of all the other type of termination, you will generally be able to claim back some losses, compensations, besides the work that has been done. The work that has been done definitely has to be paid back. It has to be valued properly by both sides, agreed upon, and then if there's any additional consequential damage that is coming out from the termination, even though it's not stated in the contract don't state it. So it becomes a very open-ended liability in that sense. But you can, under loss and expenses, try to put in the claim that you have certain costs for demobilization, you've lost some opportunities or whatever, and then you have some idling time, whatever that you think that is reasonable, you can put it in, and then the client side can access that. Like I said, there is no LAD type of like, okay, if let's say based on this 14 days, each of these days you can get some consequential damage. There's no such thing in Malaysian contract. Okay, so unfortunately, so that makes life a bit difficult. So besides the normal claim that you have to assess, upon termination, then the rest is, additional things is you can try your luck, you can try your luck, and if it's reasonable, the client side can pay. I mean, if they refuse to pay, you can sue them. I mean, then you, I don't know, you can, I suppose. But I think both parties are usually reasonable, especially with mutual agreements or with, termination because of convenience, or with certain with mutual agreement or impossibility. These are the few things that normally you terminate the contract a bit early. And when you terminate the contract a bit early, contractor may say that, now that, you terminate, yes, I agree to terminate, I'm okay to go, but you got to pay me for some of my losses. So yeah, I think it's something to be agreed upon because we don't have any rules and regulations in terms in the contract contractually for consequential damage. Okay, so I think that is on termination in general. Okay, I think these are some of the big issues that we are dealing with in terms of contract. And then, of course, we have the other issues that is quite, people already bring up, subcontracting. Is remedy out for this thing. So you all know how to provide insurance, so contractors' all risk and workmen's compensation. This is to cover the contractor have to buy. That one is a must. Okay. I think that one we don't have to explain now. I think all contractors, all SO knows the contractor is supposed to submit some form of insurance protection before they even get on to the work. Before mobilization, you should get that ready already. So, and then submitted that mobilization, before mobilization to site. So one of the condition precedent to mobilization would be the proper purchasing of all, or getting ready of all the insurance. Typically, contractors own all risk and workmen's compensation. Any issues with insurance? No, right? nominated suppliers and subcontractors. So subcontractors are engaged by contractors to carry out specific part of the work. Okay, I mean, all Malaysian contract actually tells you that you're not supposed to actually do full sub. Okay, it's not like, I mean, I know, we all know there is this like middleman, I take this contract and then pass it on to the other guy. Well, we can do specialty sub. It's just like you get a contract, but there's a part of work you give to the M&E people, part of the work you give to the waterworks people, part of the work you do sub, but the main contractor are still in charge, and they are the people who are running the whole show, running the whole management of the job, and they are actually building certain parts of the work. That is generally the type of subcontracting that we are looking at. But if you say a full sub, I'm sorry to say that it's actually not legal. You're not supposed to do that. So that defeats the purpose of asking even the question, if the subcontractor are not being paid, what can they do? Well, I'm so sorry. There's nothing that you can do, okay? Because you actually sign a contract with the main con who sub the whole thing. It's the client side don't have any responsibility to you as a subcontractor who is doing a full sub. That is a risk that you have to take. You have to have a good subcontracting agreement and not buta subcontract agreement with the contractor, the main con. So again, no such thing as back-to-back contract. That is so annoying. When I hear back-to-back contracts, it's like a nightmare. You're not supposed to have that. I mean, any subcontractor who is in their right mind should never do any back-to-back subcontract. Fine. In the end, your back-to-back subcontracting agreement, the client will not even look at it. So what is the point of applying like you can't get anything good out of your back-to-back, but whenever there is something that you need to bear the risk and responsibilities, then you are bearing the same equal risk and responsibilities with the main con. Okay? And yet you don't get the benefit of that back-to-back that is happening with the main con. So you can't go to the main con and say that because I have a back-to-back agreement with the main con, with the client, and say that I've got a back-to-back agreement with the main con, so can you pay me? You can't. Okay? So this back-to-back is completely meaningless. It's just absolute rubbish. This is just the way of the main con trying to be taking the whole responsibilities that they are supposed to bear, all the risks they're supposed to bear, and then spread it over equally to you to let them share 50-50. How stupid is that? Okay? How smart is that for them, and how stupid it is for some people who is going on to it. Okay, so best is if you are becoming a subcontractor, make sure that you sign a separate subcontractor agreement, which is legally recognized in the law of Malaysia. All the clauses must be agreed upon, and then you can negotiate. You can, C-A-N, not can't, negotiate with your main con. Okay, there's no such thing as, the main con is doing a government project, so we cannot negotiate. Well, if the main con wants to engage you as a subcon, to use your expertise, then you can negotiate. This is based on principle of freedom to contract. Okay, you must read the clauses carefully. You must go through the clauses. If there's anything that you're not agreeing upon, you must state and never agree to back-to-back. Okay, so subcon are engaged. Okay, so normal subcon, they will be forming certain part of the contract. Okay, but nominated subcon and suppliers, so NSC and NS, they are appointed by the client. They are just not normal domestic subcontractor. They are specially appointed. So because you are specially appointed, you have special rights. Okay. So as far as client is concerned, domestic subcon and supplier is an independent existence. I treat you like you don't exist. I treat you like part of the main con. It is you and his business, none of yours. Okay. But if you are a nominated subcon and supplier, because the client directly selects you, and even though they were part still under the subcon, they still have certain responsibilities for you as a subcon, especially when it comes to payment. So it means if you are really the stated NSC or NS for the client, then even though your contract is with the subcon, with the main con, you will have more rights in that sense. So you can request for payment direct from the if they're not being paid, so you are under employment. So the client, they can specify if they specify, they make you the nominator. By specifying is also very dangerous. You have to say that you are really the NSC, okay. So when you sign the agreement, also you make sure that you sign an NSC agreement. Don't just sign any subcontractor agreement again. Okay. So make sure that you are the NSC. It's stated that you are the NSC in the contract, that the client actually recognize you as an NSC, okay, or the NS. So again, why the client wants that? Because they want more control over the contractor's quality. They may want some specialists that they prefer. They may want specific brands that they prefer, that they like better. And then they want certain patterns, certain items from that specific subcontractor, or they just simply like that subcontractor a little bit better. So I don't know, it's whatever reason they actually select their own people, mean that they want that subcontractor. They know that you cannot cover everything, so they want that people to help you in a sense. So then they have more rights. So you can request for, even the contract is under the client, okay, you still have the right to ask for payment. I mean, like, let's say if you're not being paid, so the client can step in and pay you directly. But of course, not so easy lah. Then you must have proof that they are really not paying you, and the other side also must show that they are, that they haven't paid you yet in that sense. So in a way, like I say, again, practice versus actual, we have to be very careful here. Okay. Well, the name subcontractor is something in between, like what I say. You can name it, but you're not nominated. Again, so they can name it and say, hey, why don't you look for this guy? We kind of like this person, or we like this particular product, or we like this particular service, we like this particular SOP or whatever from this subcontractor. So yeah, so effectively they are like the domestic subcontractors, but there is a list. There is a list for them to select. For example, you are with, let's say, what about, there's a list of people that they like, so they give it to the main con and say, oh, why don't you look for these people to help you? See, so these are in the list, but they are not nominated. They're definitely not nominated. They are treated the same way as domestic subcontractor, which means general. Okay. So are we clear about this? Okay. And full sub is not allowed. You're not supposed to sublet out the whole project to another. And the rest of the other issues is like access. So how access is like that means that rights of ways. There's one thing. Some people like to put access to site as rights. I mean, they like to lump this with rights of way. So there's no rights of way in the contract itself, but they have this word access to site. So the access must be provided, and then also vice versa. The access must also be provided for the XO and also the client to visit the site as well. So it's like a vice versa thing. In terms of the access must be provided for the material to go in, the rights of way. So under rights of way, people can take access to site as rights of way. There are also contracts that talks about access to site as in the access to the information, access to the site itself by the client and the XO. Okay. So they must complement the, I will try to revamp this a little bit to make it a bit clearer. Design of works, meaning that nowadays we have a lot of contractors trying to give alternative designs and all that. So again, this is typical. I mean, like, quite normal. Whereby you propose something and then the SO site or the client side will get you to do a proper design, chop and sign by external engineers. So basically the contract, even though the contractor are, propose, the client side or SO, through SO actually approve the design. So it is still under the responsibilities of the contractor to make sure that pay the full liability of that part of the work. I guess if you say that the complication, I would say that, even though that part of the design is actually done by the external the contractor with the external engineers, external PE and all that, in the end, they are only certifying on that part. So, but that part is actually the full part of the whole section, that whole building or whole system. And then if that part doesn't work and the rest of the part doesn't work, so who bears the responsibility? This is always something of the issues that I always don't find comfortable, especially like when you do design and you don't do design for the roof, for example, or you don't do design for the soil protection, for example. And then, but they are all part of parcel of the original design. So if one fails, then how to prove that the other is causing the problem, or that you are the original design is causing the problem, because they're all joined together. It's not like a separate thing. So I don't know what's the point of making it liability of who and who, so and so. I don't know. So I mean, in the end, I think the issue will be very disputable in that sense. So that is dealing with design of works. So I think we basically cover everything. Is there any part of the contract that we didn't cover? I think we covered all the clauses, I would say, almost all the clauses in a typical contract. For all contract must follow the legal law of Malaysia. Okay. Or if you dig up any artifacts or any heritage or whatever, antiques, that one I think is another clause on that. That one belongs to the client, not the contractor. So you cannot take it and put it in your own pocket and sell it at Starbucks fee for like a few $1 million. That one will be returned back to the government or the museums or whatever. That is dealt by the client normally. Okay. What else? That's about it. I think we're done. Okay. So let's move on. I think you all must be so bogged down. Either you're so bogged down by so many information, or you are totally sleeping, falling asleep already. I guess this is the kind of topic that either you're interested in or you're not interested in. Some people find anything contract is really, really boring, but some people do enjoy it. Okay. But let's stop this for a while. Okay, anything that you want to do discussion upon? I mean, we can do some discussion on any of the issues, anything that is dealing with the contract. Is my voice still okay? I find myself sort of like turning low on my volume.
Yeah, doctor, you're okay.
Yeah, okay. Today, there's no kids running around, so be quiet. Are you guys in the office now or at home?
I'm at home.
You don't work on Saturday?
No, I don't.
It's Easter as well, huh?
Yeah.
Our last class will be next Sunday morning, 8 a.m. And I'll be covering I'm not covering conflict management, because conflict management is actually under organization behavior, I believe. So I'm not going to cover that. I'll be covering on purely dispute resolution. So the other thing that you realize that in the whole contract issues that I did not cover with you is dispute. So that one we leave it under a special category of dispute, which I will cover together with adjudication, and that will probably take us about 1 hour plus 2 hours, and then we finish it up, and then we will class it with exam tips. Okay, so do come for the class. Okay, because there's so many things to go through. I believe you feel like there's so many topics, so many readings, so many notes. So I will actually give you more specific tips on the whole thing, exactly like, not exactly lah, you know what's coming out for the exam, but to link you up with the right direction, hopefully. So we'll finish up with exam tips and wrap up. So that would be the last class. So adjudication will come in last. So today we finish all the contractual issues beside dispute. And then the next class I'll have pre-recorded covering on the law of tort. This is on professional negligence and what is supposed to be, what does say about standard of care, duty of care, you know, and that of course will link with professional indemnity and all that. So that one is one shot of class, consider as one class. Okay, and then the last class will be on resolution, education especially. But education, unfortunately, is not covering all issues, but more. Okay. Now, if you have questions, we can go through anything that you are practicing. Aziru, just now, did I answer your question?
Yes, doctor.
So, are you an NSC or are you just a just a domestic subcontractor?
At the moment, no lah. Just referencing to my old project, because we need to intervene the payment terms.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, like if you're a client and then if you do actually, like I say, as a client, be very careful when we talk about whether you are naming it as a domestic or whether you are nominated. If you do want somebody specifically, you make sure, if you do want to make sure that somebody's being paid properly, then they are a nominated subcontractor, so you have to activate that. If you're coming from a client's point of view, like I said, domestic subcontractor, if you are coming from a client's point of view, like this is really an independent, none of your business kind of thing, you know, what they are doing, you know, in their own home, basically, you know. So you know, how they sign a contract or that you cannot intervene, you know, so it's domestic stuff.
Last time in repeat, there was a strike due to non-payment by the contractor lah. So since the subcon, not only one subcon involved, there are many of them, and then this subcon also involved in multiple projects within the same area lah. That's why eventually we need to intervene the contractors.
Because if they are a nominated subcontractor, you have legal responsibility to them. You have contractual responsibility. But if they are domestic, meaning that they are subcontractors that is under the direct employment of the main con, and they are actually coming all the way, all the issues is coming to the main con, which can happen because they are desperate already. Also, they don't get payment, in a very dire position, you know, whether to proceed or not. And then in the end, it does affect the job. So it is, I mean, it is your fault. You know, you are not legally bounded to intervene. But if you do intervene, you have to be very clear about the procedures for intervening. Because if you just want to take the money from the mancon and pay the subcon, you could be getting into trouble with the mancon later. Okay, meaning that mancon is saying that you are not paying them, you know, and all that. So then it becomes a lot of different issues, you know, and then that really you are putting each other on a very adversarial kind of position. So when you do intervene with the mancons, like paying directly to the subcon, even though they're not a nominated subcontractor, you really have to have proper agreement. You really have to have proper reminder notification to the mancon, and then maybe even have meetings and to actually discuss this with the mancon whether you would like me to directly pay these people. Then after that, how do you deal with the rest of the things later on? See? So everything has to be put on papers for you to be on safeguarding your own position in that sense. The main point. Otherwise, you are being kind, you're doing a good thing, but you're going to bring trouble to yourself. Okay? Because contractually, you don't have any rights to do that.
Dr. Ting, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. So I'm just waiting for you guys to see if there's anything that you want to talk about.
Oh, okay, okay.
We do cover a lot of things, you see, so I'm not sure whether there are things that maybe you guys have practiced something and then you don't agree with something, or or maybe you have your own opinion on certain things. We can always discuss that. Well, really, nothing. Okay, anything on the assignment? So far, I think the most hardworking two, Clarence and Yihuan, has been showing me the assignment. The rest of you so quiet. Everything just DIY. Shoot yourself.
Still
Okay?
working on it.
Still working on it. Yeah. Really, no question on assignment. Everything all done already, so we call it a day, It's 10:30 only.
Dr. Ting, I will share my assignment to you later on.
Can. I still owe Law the second version also. I haven't had time to look at it yet. Yeah, so if you send it to me by this week, I will try to get back to every one of you by Monday, huh?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ting.
I think both of your assignment is just maybe the flow, huh? And Law one was previously the detail. Hivan was your flow, Your flow was a bit, every way, bits and pieces like that. So I think if you rearrange it a little bit, I think that would be quite okay. And the
Yeah,
rest,
I actually I based on the case study what you mentioned in the assignment notes.
Yeah.
So it's a bit here and there, I understand that. So now I actually summarize it again and then I attach it with the case studies.
The cases, like I said, if you guys find it like confidential, don't worry. If you're doing single project and it's confidential, we can always put watermark what you did, and also put you don't have to put the cases in the appendix also if you don't want to. You can describe it or you can blind it as well. That is fine. So
Yeah.
I have no objection to
I
that.
I don't have the problem with you. I just put it in a disclaimer because my case is actually quite sensitive. It's still under arbitration.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, if you read through it, then you will see that actually what that you have mentioned or what you have taught us these couple of weeks, they're all in there, the terms of payments, the termination clauses, the CIPA things, they're all there. Just
Yeah.
coincidentally that this case, everything is there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope that this sort of classes actually is helpful in that sense. Practically helpful hopefully for everybody, for you to either do a bit of recap onto your contract knowledge, and also for those people who are not having contract knowledge at all, I think this one will be helpful, hopefully in terms of you knowing your rights and all that. I still want to emphasize on the last point is contract basically gives us the the rights, you understand your own rights, you understand your obligations, and you also have to understand your duties, your responsibilities. Okay, so again, many people take it like they understand their rights, but they don't really understand their responsibilities. That would be one of the issues that human beings that we would tend to be a bit like that, I would say. Okay, tend to be a bit more like close up on our own benefit. I mean, open up on our own benefit and close up on things that are not beneficial to us, you see. So that is very much character based as well. And also there is also remedies, meaning that there are things that, what if this is not done, what can you do? So this is the kind of things that we can use to protect ourselves whenever we are practicing. So in terms of contract, the summary is like, it's there. Okay, many times I say it's there. You must know. You cannot not know your rights and your responsibilities and the potential way to protect yourself in terms of the remedies. Okay, but I would say that it's commonly acknowledged within the Malaysian construction industry that we are using standard forms. And those standard forms that are particularly being issued by the authoritative bodies and professional bodies. Okay, they tend to be drafted. Professional body not too bad, okay, but the government bodies one was actually very tend to prompt to the government agencies their own favor. So it's always draft maybe more in favor. I would say definitely, I've mentioned this in many papers, in many times, that they are draft in favors of the client. So I mean, this is a practice that I think all agencies must come to realization, whether it's with construction contracts or whether it's with consultancy agreement, by trying to draft a contract that is totally favoring to yourself, may look good, may look smart, client-centric, may be very smart for that person who has done it. But in the way, when it comes to practice, it's going to create a lot of problems. Okay, and they are very client-centric in terms of VO, in terms of payment, in terms of extension of time, in terms of suspension, in terms of termination. All these things, they are drafted inherently like DNA. There is already like a bomb that is implanted there, that this is a very unjust contract. So, and then of course with government contract, you really have any bargaining power with the government, meaning that you don't sit down and say, hey, this clause I don't agree with it, can you change it like this? Or this one is not like this, can we negotiate? Normally you can't. So first and foremost, you have a very unfair contract to start off with. It's very client-centric. And then after that, you don't have any bargaining power at all. So then there is also a very lack of check and balance within the government agency to do this sort of procedure. I mean, there is also lacking in terms of procedures, and there is also lacking in terms of check and balance. So all these are actually adding up to a contract that is going to be pretty much at the broad discretion of the client. And because the SO is a representative of the client, so that they are able to pick it, and use it at a more, use it at their broader discretion kind of thing, So their power becomes a bit unlimited in that sense. And that, if, as the older engineers like some of you are here, you believe, you think about, your integrity does not allow you to do that. But there are people who are young and they have not been through a lot, and then they will take it like, whoa, one signature from me, like you are dead, kind of thing, and then then it turns out to be like a misuse of power and abuse, and they forgot that the other part of their responsibilities, in the sense that, as a SO, because you are professional, you are an engineer, you are trained as an engineer, you have a title of an engineer, you are bounded by the rule of conduct, you are bound by the Engineers Act, and to act fairly, to be, putting up the public's interest, to put public interest at the forefront, to not, to have good conduct in the sense, and good conduct, especially there's a very big sentence there to, act fairly and impartially, and then you need to make judgment that is with skills, with care, with diligence, and then you have to be fair about it, you have to be impartial about it. But again, you are engaged under the client, like playing onto the client's form. The client is whether the client bestow or not bestow, the form itself, the contract clauses itself already bestow a lot of power to you see, as an SO. So that actually becomes a very, that raise the question of abuse, of misuse, and all that. So you have a contract that potentially already is a time bomb, and yet, there is a bed here there is a bedrock here that is completely easily invested with abuse and misuse. So again, running of this contract and managing of this contract is really very difficult in that sense. So managing contract is a very difficult thing, and then, but as engineer, our job is to administer the contract. You need to administer it fairly, and actually you need to do things that is for the public interest, not really everything for the client's interest. You have to be very clear about your role here, see. But you have dual role. So when you have the dual role, again, that imbalance is there. So you need to do balancing, and that imbalance can be created. So this contractual imbalance actually raises very important questions of where is the principle of natural justice and good faith in the performance of contracts. See? So we don't really impose a general duty of good faith, meaning that some courts do, some jurisdictions do, some jurisdictions impose the fact that, engineers must act as an engineer first, as an SO first, before you act for the contract in that sense. But here we don't, so contract will take precedence here. So, when you don't even have that, so in circumstances where a client actually wield some contractor power, that is arbitrary and oppressive in that sense, and then you behave in bad faith, in bad conduct. So first of all, even though they don't have that good faith conduct, like you do it, in a good conduct, in a good manner, in a just manner, in a good, like going towards a professional way of doing things. Well, the court can actually, the last resort would be not going back to the contract, but going to court. When you go to court, and court will scrutinize this sort of conduct, and then, especially if it defeats the underlying purpose of a contract. Underlying purpose of the contract is to make it equal to everybody. Doctrine of freedom to contract, meaning that anybody in Malaysia who is over the age of 18, 21, legally sane and blah, 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 if you can fulfill, the terms of making a contract, you can. So you can contract. Okay, so there is a freedom to contract, but it's not absolute. So court do control. If there is they do control, they do base it on that equitable principles, okay, and implied terms, to address any gross imbalances and bad faith behavior. So if you're found being very unprofessional about things in handling suspension, in handling termination, in handling EOT, LAD, this sort of things, if it's being contested, if it's being disputed, okay, like I say, even though this is a very client-friendly kind of contract, you will see that in many cases the client did not win the case. Okay? So don't think that because you have that power, that you have that weapon in terms of contract, that you are like, you can do anything. So in line of more international and modern contract management practice, there is a better risk allocation now. People are going towards a very collaborative kind of contracting, especially in terms of large scale infrastructure design and build projects and all that. So clients are encouraged to avoid exercising contractor rights in a punitive manner, and instead of adoptive, a very collaborative, very work together kind of treatment. So very easy for me to say, but it's very individual kind of thing, But like I said, I just want to remind everybody, especially those of you who are in the SO and the client side, do not think that because you have you have that cushion there of a very unequitable contract that you can actually do whatever you want. Because in the end, if the money amount is really big, there's a big things at stake here. We may have contractors who contest and go for arbitration, go for dispute and all that, and then you will see that these things will come out, and you may not be on the winning side. So in the end, you may be punished, because of instead of being protected, you are being punished. Especially if the contract is way out of balance in that sense, and then plus the practice of bad faith here. I think that is something that we learn in that sense. Okay. I think that is my conclusion about contract. Stay, you must know it, you must know your rights, you must know your duties, you must know what you should do as an administrator, as an engineer to a contract. Okay. Read it. If you don't understand fully, even though read it after a few times, you will understand. After a few practice, it will get better. But read it, understand it, and then practice in good faith. Practice with proper SOP, with proper information communication with the other party. Okay, and then doing documentation, doing records, very, very important, absolutely important, especially when it comes to contesting. Contractor, please have the habit of keeping documentation. Make sure that your documentation are up to date. Make sure that you have people today to keep documentation, not just get the work done. It is wrong for contractor nowadays to say, old contractor will tell you things like, get the things done now. Important things work on site must finish lah. Also no use. Well, unfortunately, in today's world, this is very useful. It's very important. Okay. Documentation is absolutely important. If there's because documents will supplement your practice. It will supplement. It will show you how you practice in bad faith or good faith. If you don't do documentation, if you fail to do documentation, if you fail to submit certain things, whether you are SO, whether you are contractor, it will basically reflect on your conduct. It will reflect on your bad faith behavior. That will actually means whether you actually have a good case in your pocket or not. Okay? Well, in the end, we don't want to go to dispute. If you go to dispute, then in the end, lawyers will earn all the money, arbitrators will earn all the money. Things may not be solved. And then many adjudication actually went up to court again later on. I mean, what's the point, So it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. And I guess because for contractors, their main issues is because they are worried about payment. If you go for a dispute, then the payment will be stopped right then and there. That will be usually, if the work is suspended, terminated, there's no payment, and they are a bit worried about that. So they will usually be very, very gentle with the approach with the consultant and also with the SO, with the client. Not all, some will be. Again, those that is doing it in good faith may actually be winning the case at the end of the day. So like I said, put out your work. Put out the documents carefully. What you need to write, what you need to do, what you need to putting, minutes need to be done, reports need to be done, information needs to be given, letter needs to be given, instructions need to be given, what is there to be in writing must be in writing. So it will all reflect on practice. You see, so reflect on your practice, reflect on your good faith. So I think that's all I have to say lah, basically lah, huh? Okay. So if there's no more questions, we'll call it a day. But just wait for another few more minutes. We will do the QR code for the next session. We take a short break and then we come back at 11 to do the QR for the next session. Then I will put up. I think you all still have recording from Thursday, so go through that first, and then after that, I will post up Monday or Tuesday lah. I will post up Tuesday lah. Most likely, I'll post up the law of talk, so you guys take a look at law of talk. But finish up on your current one first, huh? Otherwise, you have too many things that is lacking behind. First session, no more people wants to pop in, right? It should be all day. I think you only start talking in around 11. It's a strict thing now, so just have to wait until 11 huh? Then once you call in, you can go off lah, huh? Anyone wants to stay back for any questions or anything like that, feel free to stay back if you want.
Thank you, Dr. Ting. Thank you.
Okay, I think most of us scan attendance already lah, huh? So if there's no more questions, you can go off lah, huh? Have a good weekend, good Easter, happy Easter.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Ting.
Dr. Ting.
See you guys.
Yeah,
See you,
bye-bye.
bye-bye.
See you next week,
Thank
huh?
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
See you.